to cause it to dip down closer to the Earth so it can be tapped for a huge electrical power generating station, which is insanity because they don't know what they're dealing with. They're dealing with the planet's electrical system.
The electrojet affects global weather. Sometimes during a magnetic storm, for instance, it touches the Earth. It can knock out telephone cables and power grids.
What HAARP is capable of doing is to modify the electrojet. By modifying the electrojet, that current in the ionosphere, it has a capability of generating low-frequency waves.
What essentially the system does that's different is instead of the radio frequency energy dissipating as it goes up from the antenna array, it's actually focused. And the larger the antenna array, the higher they can focus the energy. And once they get the energy up into the ionosphere, depending on what they want to do, they can create a secondary frequency causing the ionosphere to vibrate, sending that signal back down to the Earth. And what that essentially does is allow them the ability to communicate at very high data rates with submarines, also allows for the possibility of Earth-penetrating tomography, or in the vernacular would be like X-raying the Earth or looking into the Earth several kilometers deep.
I heard one of the scientists point out they can make these ELF waves penetrate the Earth and get an image when that comes back. When I did this in '85, that kind of capability did not exist.
We, in fact, are doing experiments, or plan to do experiments, to see if we can detect tunnels underground.
There is a way of being able to use this type of technology to be able to look for minerals that can be just below the surface of the Earth. Oil, gas, different types of ore.
HAARP can be used to explore oils or gold mine and the like. Basically because the signal, low-frequency signal, can penetrate deeper into the Earth or the water or the ocean than the high-frequency signal.
But this same kind of signals in the same frequency range, can affect human mood. The human brain operates on very low frequencies. For example, when we're thinking, actively, we're generating about 13, 14 cycles per second. When we're meditating, we're generating 8 cycles per second. And when we're asleep, the brain waves are running at about 4 cycles per second. And HAARP is capable of generating all of these frequencies. These kinds of signals can control the human brain. And if you can control these frequencies and multiples of these frequencies and various combinations, you can control all kinds of emotions. You can generate happiness, you could generate sadness, you can generate any mood you want.
We are immersed in ELF waves. And those, as far as I know, maybe they are affecting us, but but these waves are minuscule compared to those.
You know, the issue of ELF, extremely low frequencies affecting mental states of individuals, is not new. It goes back to Yale University and the work of Jose Delgado, which is well recognized in the literature. He started first using implants in the brain. He then used radio frequency with implants, and eventually he found that energy at 1/50th of what the Earth naturally produces could, in fact, in certain frequency ranges, trigger huge mood swings.
I know the physical effect, but not the biological effect. It's a different area.
I was considered a child prodigy in electronics. My entire life has been devoted to the study of the effects of electromagnetic energies on the human mind. When I was 13 years old, I invented a device that transmits sound to the human brain using electromagnetic waves. So this is my field. I've been studying this field for over 40 years. And HAARP scares me because I know what it can do. I know that HAARP can be used to control the human mind.
I'm not sure that the people involved with HAARP are aware that humans are made up of energy, that the energy fields of Earth and humans are closely aligned.
I don't even understand what you mean by energy. Humans are made up of energy. What does that mean?
Humans are like balls of energy. We're made up of electricity and magnetic energy, just like the Earth.
Are humans made up of energy? Well, what do they say? We're 90% water. But the rest of it is an electrochemical, and that's a form of energy, yes.
All living things are exquisitely sensitive to some of the lowest levels of energy. We just couldn't imagine this. and it's been the subject of hot debate. How can life be so sensitive to the tiniest amounts of energy? But because this is how we are bioregulated, by virtue of tiny energy transactions within our body and also coming from the earth, this is indeed the case. There are many different electromagnetic projects and technologies out there that are affecting our health today.
This document from Maxwell Air Force Base lays out the use of electromagnetic weapons technologies for debilitating human beings.
Using electromagnetic warfare against human beings, you can cause disease, you can cause hysteria, or you can cause passivity for population control.
Extremely low frequencies affect us because they are the same frequencies that our brains output. And when they're in the environment around us, our brains try to entrain to them. So our brains try to mimic those signals. And if those signals are not good ones for our behavior, then we can fall apart. We can behave differently, we could get sick, we could feel very stressed and not know why.
Once in a while when you have a power outage, most people can identify the fact that they have a release of tension. The minute the electricity goes out, they feel an inner relaxation, a tension release, and when the power goes back on, the tension returns. So this is something that most of us can feel. Everyone has a certain sensitivity to electromagnetic waves. It's just that some people are more sensitive than others.
The symptoms that I discovered in my research caused by electromagnetic frequencies are anxiety, depression, diarrhea, dizziness, extreme fatigue, headaches, lightheadedness, mood swings, nausea, nighttime increase in urination, pulse rate, a sudden increase, shortness of breath, tingling, prickling feeling of the skin, vertigo, nosebleeds, blood pressure increase, and body tremors.
You can also cause cancer. You can disrupt the genetic structure of our cells. You can cause long-term damage in terms of mutagenic damage over generations, or you can cause very short-term damage, and you can actually cause somebody to just have their cells fall apart and hemorrhage to death.
I found from people who were writing me and calling me from all over the country that they were suffering from either one or all of these same symptoms, and every single one of them lived close by to a transmitter.
You know this from HAARP to GWIN to these towers that are all over the United States now.
GWIN stands for Ground Wave Emergency Network. In nuclear attack, the ionosphere would be essentially destroyed by air bursts of nuclear weapons, and there wouldn't be any reflection, and all communication links would go out. Was thought of as an emergency backup communication link in case of nuclear attack.
The weapons technologies are changing so dramatically at this particular time. It'd be like equating introduction of gunpowder to the West or the beginning of the atomic age earlier this century. And that's what's happening with electromagnetic weapons technologies today.
The Air Force Phillips Laboratory is the Air Force's primary laboratory for doing space research, and that involves things like HAARP, studying the ionosphere. Anything the Air Force needs for space, we look into, and that includes weapons for space application, one of which is developing plasma toroids, projectiles made of plasma, essentially the atmosphere of stars, being able to harness that energy and to be able to fire it at a target. We have a device called Shiva. Shiva is a large capacitor bank. Capacitors store electrical energy. And then in a very short time, we release that energy. In about 100 millionths of a second, we will release the same amount of energy as the entire U.S. electrical production for that same instant in time, where the electrons rip from their orbits and you have a soupy gaseous mixture, thousands of degrees hot. Potentially a very serious weapon.
Electromagnetic warfare can also be used in coordination with ionospheric warfare.
After I had actually left the program in 1987, one of the last communications I had with ARCO indicated that there had been a contract awarded for ionospheric warfare studies.
I have not heard of ionospheric warfare. I don't even know what the term means.
In other words, using the ionosphere as an amplifier and as a broadcast medium. What we're actually doing with the ionosphere at that point is we're not just reflecting a signal, we are amplifying the signal. We are causing it to become much, much more intense, hundreds of thousands of times more intense than it would have been otherwise. We're broadcasting that signature over a large area of the Earth.
HAARP says it's not producing a weapon.
HAARP cannot be used as a weapon.
Some of our critics have argued that HAARP is only the beginning and could be a major weapons system. That just isn't true.
What HAARP is basically a ground-based Star Wars weapon technology.
I'm the Attorney General and Environmental Program Manager for the Upper Cook Inlet Environmental Protection Consortium. And we've been working on HAARP for many years. And they've located HAARP at Gakona because of the magnetosphere is closest to the surface of the Earth. And they need that magnetic pole to do their shots into the ionosphere and stratosphere. With HAARP and however long it's been on the drawing board, the people here haven't known about it that long. And it changed from one thing to another. And what a lot of people are not aware of is it's ground-based Star Wars technology. And the United States Congress has said that they quit funding Star Wars. So they call it everything else but Star Wars to get it funded.
I just don't know whether it's an outgrowth of Star Wars.
The application described in the 1991 patent would be such that if anybody were to fire a missile from any direction, anywhere, to another point on Earth, it would intersect this relativistic layer and be basically exploded.
I've never been asked whether this is an outgrowth of Star Wars or not.
As a scientist, you do like to be recognized for things you've done. And because I couldn't write to the press, I'm under ARCO confidentiality, I sent a letter to Lord Cook, the chairman of the board of ARCO, and received actually a very nice letter back complimenting me for my contributions and assuring me that they would inform the HAARP people of my contribution.
There was never any intention to build anything associated with what Mr. Eastland had proposed in his patent.
If you read the patents, I was thinking of ways to use it defensively. One was as an anti-satellite device. You could make these electrons in space and hurt a satellite. That could be used either for offense or defense. We could hurt the enemy's communications while maintaining ours, and I was interested to note that that was one of the things said in the HAARP basic technical document.
Star Wars was the state-of-the-art military technology of the 80s, but in the 90s and in the new millennium, it's going to be electromagnetic warfare.
What we do know about electromagnetic systems and electromagnetic warfare is becoming even more interesting. As late as April 28, 1997, U.S. Secretary of Defense Cohen announced at University of Georgia that, in fact, geophysical warfare was becoming a more intense problem. In fact, they even speculated that terrorist organizations would have systems that could modify weather, create volcanic eruptions, or even cause earthquakes using electromagnetic waves.
You know, earthquakes is another thing. We have had a lot of them, a lot of volcanoes more in the last few years. Whether or not that is just a cycle of happenings, because we've had a history of earthquakes and volcanoes throughout recorded history, but it just seems to me like that it's coming more often, and that there has to be some connection with some of the things that we as humans are doing to our Earth.
The issue of earthquakes has been, looked at by other specialists, even going back to the work of J.F. Gordon MacDonald when he was at UCLA in the late 60s. He was also a science advisor. Lyndon Johnson is a specialist in geophysical warfare. He asserted then if you could ever get enough energy in at just the right frequency and just the right waveform, you could in fact trigger these kinds of events. And I think that's exactly what the Secretary of Defense, Cohen, was saying just a few days ago, was it's this idea that now terrorists may possess this kind of technology. It's obvious. I mean, if we're concerned that terrorists have it, we certainly do.
Back in 1912, Nikola Tesla said it was possible to split the planet by combining the correct vibrations with the resonance of the planet itself.
The idea of affecting weather for many people, it gets to the point where you say, well, can that even be real? And when you go back in time, even to 1976, the United States, along with over 60 other countries, signed an accord where we agreed to not use weather manipulation as a weapon of war. This is before biological and chemical treaties, before many of the nuclear disarmament treaties, and yet that was such a big threat in '76. Has the science progressed? Certainly.
We're in this sea of energy. We're in a sea of gases. We're in a sea of particles that are charged. And they're moving constantly, just like a current in the ocean, just like the wind in the atmosphere. This current forms. And you draw and you attract these particles. Well, Wilhelm Reich attracted these particles. He pointed it at the sky and he said, you want clouds to be built there? You got a drought? He would point the device at that place and clouds would form there.
In the 40s, there was interest in weather modification. That by the 50s, there was actual experimentation in that area. By the 1960s, that area had advanced substantially.
Well, there have been programs with salting clouds, you know, salting things with silver iodide, and there's been some experiments where people from airplanes threw chaff out, the little pieces of metal, and tried to get those to absorb power.
We have done such damage to the thermal balance, to the hydrologic balance of this planet at this point. We are seeing more and more disasters. You have to watch the news. You have to notice these things. You can't just take Prozac and forget about it, and the next day you see the whole Ohio River Valley was just flooded. Billions of dollars of damage. Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people left without homes. And they actually say that they can make weather. Well, tell me, have you noticed any good weather here lately? The thing that people don't take into account is we are changing the entire density of our atmosphere, the viscosity of the atmosphere's ability to flow and be fluid, to be freely flowing. We're changing that.
Today we have a number of technologies, not just HAARP, but satellites and other ionosphere heaters placed in strategic locations all over the world that can create the disruptions in lightning.
Here's a paper that was recently unearthed that talks about creating what's called a highly ionized column up through the atmosphere.